Good morning, and welcome to this WIOA Wednesday webinar. My name is Jennifer Phillips with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I'll be the technology manager for today's webinar. Today's topic, the art and science of service integration, cultures that facilitate collaboration by IDRS and local workforces. Just as a reminder, all the participants on this call are in listen mode only and cannot unmute themselves. If you have questions as the webinar proceeds, please post your question in the Q&A or chat box and we will address them at the end of the webinar. Just as a reminder, this webinar will be recorded. The presentation, the recording, and any materials presented during today's meeting will be available on the ICSPS illinoisstate.edu website and on Illinois WorkNet's website within 48 hours. The link to this presentation, recording, and slides are in the chat for you right now. In an effort to be as accessible as possible during this webinar, we will be offering closed captioning as well. And I want to make sure that that is started too. At the end of the webinar and tomorrow, each of you will receive a follow-up email, which will include a survey asking about today's webinar. I will also put that link in the chat at the end. Please provide feedback and any suggestions you have to help improve upcoming webinars, or if you're interested in a follow-on on this particular topic. Just as a reminder, if you have a faulty internet or slow internet connection and would prefer to call in, you can do so by calling into the webinar using the phone number in your original registration email. And with that, I'm going to get us started with our presenters. So I'd like to introduce today's facilitator, Craig Kissinger from National Tube and Supply. Craig, oh, you know what? Sorry, Craig, I forgot to do the polls. Let's, we're gonna do two poll questions to get a sense of audience geography and organizational affiliation. So I'm gonna launch the first poll, and that's asking what partner organization you represent.
I'm glad I read host and panelists cannot vote. I'm sitting there clicking going, this isn't working.
It's doing the same thing.
Yeah. All right, it looks like we're almost at, give people another 30 seconds here.
Did you see that Mark is on?
I did, yes. All right, I'm going to end that poll and share these results real quick. So it looks like the majority of folks are representing Title I. We've got some other titles represented, and the other, about 20% other WIOA stakeholders and state or local workforce board members, about 24%. I'm going to close this poll and open the next. Where's the next one? You know what, the geography poll, Craig, is not working right now. So I'm going to skip forward and go back to introducing you and not spend time on that. Normally we'd ask where you are on the geography side of things. So kicking it off, I'd like to introduce Craig Kissinger from National Tube and Supply. Craig is also the co-chair of the Will County Workforce Investment Board. He is going to kick off today's topic and introduce the panelists. So take it away, Craig.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I appreciate the invite to facilitate today's conversation. This conversation started with a planning conversation that we're having for another discussion, where we were talking about ways to kind of celebrate and work together. We had a great conversation around success stories between local workforce development, some of their partners, and businesses. And from that, we had a great conversation about integration and pathways for targeted populations as we look at different partners in the community. How can we target certain segments of that population, which was kind of a catalyst for us to say, hey, what a great opportunity for us to highlight this and highlight some of the best practices that are happening across the state, because oftentimes, you know, we struggle with working through some of those internal partnerships. We inherently build silos, and particularly in today's workforce, as we look to have a one-stop shop, we need to break down those barriers. So some of the examples that we want to talk about today is really look at where is integration of services working, and have the practitioners who are doing it share some of their models. So to help with that, we've got a great set of panelists today. I would like to introduce the panelists from Will County. Susan, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll hand it off to Damien.
I'm Susan Flessner. I'm the Director of the Workforce Services Division of Will County, and also the one-stop operator for the Workforce Center of Will County.
And good morning, I'm Damien McDonald. I'm the supervisor of the Joliet Division of Rehabilitation Services, and we serve Will and Grundy County.
Thank you for being here today. And next up, we'd like to introduce our partners from the Quad City area. Go ahead, Mark.
Good morning. I am Mark Lohman. I'm the Executive Director for the American Job Center in local workforce investment area 13, Rock Island, Henry, and Mercer counties. And Jenny, I will let you introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Mark. My name's Jenny Miller, and I'm the Director of Community Employment Services with the Arc of the Quad Cities. We're in Rock Island.
And Amy.
I'm Amy Ford. I'm the supervisor for the Division of Rehabilitation Services located in the Rock Island office. We serve people who have disabilities and want to find employment or get help with training.
Thank you, Mark, Jenny, and Amy for joining us today. We also have with us a couple additional people from Area 24 and Region 5. Rick, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Rick Stubblefield. I'm the Executive Director of St. Clair County's Intergovernmental Grants Department and Economic Development Departments. Our Intergovernmental Grants Department administers workforce programs for our local workforce area 24 in southwestern Illinois. And prior to assuming this role, I was the coordinator of the Workforce Development Group.
And Susan.
I'm Susan Chapman. I'm the Assistant Bureau Chief for the Division of Rehab Services for Region 5, which is the lower 33 counties. But prior to this, I was the supervisor of the local DOORS offices in Belleville and East St. Louis, St. Clair County.
So thank you all the panelists for joining us today. I think based on the group that we have, both from regionally, right? We span a whole bunch of different regions. As we know, in Illinois, we have microcultures, right, that across the state. And I think this is going to be a great conversation of what's working and what are best practices in various areas, whether it's very metropolitan or, you know, a little bit farther out in the different parts of the state. So why don't we kick it off with the first question? And that question comes to you from the standpoint of, what does service integration mean to your individual agency or organization? And specifically, why is it important? Who wants to take it? Why don't we go ahead and start in the Quad Cities?
Yeah, I can start if that would be okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, so service integration really means everything to our customers. And again, I introduced myself by saying we serve customers with a wide variety of disabilities. And what service integration does for us, it helps us give our customers information about resources in the local area. And it also helps support the mission of our agency. We are the lead agency in the state of Illinois that serves people with disabilities. And so we do work in partnership, and we've always worked in partnership with people with disabilities and their families, our local agencies, because we want them to achieve full community participation, whether it's through employment, education, or independent living. And connecting them with our with our local area is very important. It helps, really, the service integration does help our customers, helps them make informed choices about the services that they would like to receive, that they need. And it also gives our counselors and even our coordinators the appropriate supports that they need, because we can't solve all the issues and help with everything that's going on with the customer. We focus on employment, but what we do is we gather a lot of information in our first meeting with the customer, and it's called our initial interview. And we do have master's level counselors who conduct that interview. But what we want to do is we want to really cover a wide variety of topics, whether it's the customer's disability, could be mental health or health conditions. We really want to know what barriers they're facing in employment, what they face, what they currently face, what their fears are, any requested services they need. And so someone may come to us and they may have some housing or shelter needs. They may be wanting to seek unemployment benefits and don't know how to do that. We get information about their vocational interests and goals, what education and training that they have, their work history. But, you know, we spend a lot of time in that initial interview because we want to develop a plan of action that doesn't just involve our agency and what we're able to provide, but can link them to the appropriate resources around the area. So I think through that information gathering, we just try to figure out how to connect with our local partners, and that's how we build relationships, really one customer at a time.
Suzanne Fleshner, you guys have kind of a cool approach to this in our local one stop. And can you talk a little bit how we facilitate that in Will County and how that integration works with some of the partners, particularly with DHS?
So, yeah, well, picking up off of what Amy said, and I was just shaking my head the whole entire time she was talking, because I mean, that's, I think, exactly the approach we've taken here. I think one of the most important things and one of the most beneficial things about this whole service integration, and this is an initiative that started statewide like almost 2 years ago now, I think, is being able to provide the service to the customer, and they don't really know. I mean, customers typically do not care who helps them with this service or who reviews my resume, or they don't care if you're Title 1 or 2 or 10 or whatever. They just want that service, and they want to be able to receive it in a timely manner, and they want to be able to receive it from someone who has, you know, good skills and qualifications to be able to provide that service. So to me, that was the most important part of the whole service integration initiative, is that customers could receive the services that they needed, whether it was job seeker or business, really. And it didn't matter, you know, which staff person was providing that service, as long as they got the service that they needed and got their need fulfilled.
And how do you track that though, Susan? Because don't you have an approach or some tools that you've created locally to track that process?
The track service process?
Yeah, and that they hit all the boxes and who they still have to talk to?
Sure. We actually use an electronic tracking system for folks who come in. It's called G-Stars. So when a customer comes into the center for the first time, they sit down and go through a screen that says, you know, do this service, that service. It describes and explains all the services of all the partners, all 16 of them, actually, who are part of the MOU. And then services that are provided, you know, services they indicate they need that are provided here on site, they receive that service immediately. So there's no need to refer anybody anywhere. They can just receive that service here in real time. And then there's a referral process set up for services that are offered as part of our system, but aren't necessarily offered by staff on site. So obviously the pandemic interrupted some of that, some of all this work really in terms of, staff being located here physically at the center, but we're slowly but surely ramping up again for that. So have a good foundation for that, as I think folks in the other areas of the state do as well.
Rick, your thoughts on why it's important to your agency integration?
Well, I think it's important because it helps us create well-rounded solutions for individuals and businesses as well. The more people that we have engaged, if everybody has the ability, if everybody is versed on all of the programs, it makes it so much easier and so much more seamless. And that's really what the integration is all about, is making this seamless for the customers so that they can move forward. But if I go a step farther than that, and both Amy and Susan mentioned it, it's about the relationships and developing these relationships. So you go a step beyond the ability to give your customers the best service, and those relationships lead you to be able to manage your job centers a lot better. I mean, early on when we had all the silos up, it was so hard to come up with budgets and come up with MOUs and get everybody on the same page. As we've talked things through, as we've integrated our services and everybody knows a little bit more about what the other one does, it has been so much easier, to communicate and to go, about the business of being able to manage the job centers.
Jen, do you have any thoughts on that? Jenny Miller?
Sorry, I was having a little difficulty unmuting.
No problem.
I would like to I guess reiterate what everyone else has said. It is very important to build the relationships. We work very closely with the Department of Rehab, with Amy Fort's staff. And, that's one of the things that we find is that when we have good relationships with the counselors, good communications, everyone has talked so much about breaking down silos, that really does allow us to provide better services to the individual job seekers. And so because we are working primarily with people who have disabilities, and in particular developmental disabilities, a key goal for us and for the ARC is full integration for everyone, and to see our job seekers have the opportunity to seek services through the American Job Center, and to do that in a way where each partner is familiar with the other services being provided and can easily facilitate that job seeker from one service provider to another, and make sure that they get their needs taken care of, really is very, very important. Often a lot of the people that we work with, if they don't have good family supports, they don't always know what they don't know, or they don't know what services are available and what's out there. So to have good service integration is just so important to us, and really even to the mission of the ARC. And I really feel like the good relationship that we have with the American Job Center and also with our local Department of Rehab has just really been so beneficial in many ways, but particularly to our job seekers.
Mark, Susan, or Damon, any other thoughts on that topic, particularly from the job center standpoint, Mark?
Well, I've learned that service integration is so important because it's the right thing to do. When we serve businesses and not-for-profit organizations and governmental entities as employers, and when we serve individuals, job seekers, students, trainees, dislocated workers, the barriers to employment and education can be significant. And so I'm really gratified that service integration includes a core partner like vocational rehabilitation, a state agency. But in our local area, the ARC of the Quad Cities is an approved local not-for-profit organization that is a full partner on our memorandum of understanding and participates on our workforce development board. And this system is about partners who are governmental partners that are not for profit. And so today we're focused on people with disabilities, and that is such a huge spectrum. And there's so many different types of disabilities, whether they're apparent or not. So in employment and training, we record self-identified disabilities for our students and our job seekers. Our community college is Blackhawk College, and they offer disability services. The Illinois Department of Employment Security has the Disabled Veterans Outreach Program, and the Illinois Department of Human Services, of course, has vocational rehabilitation. And then we have other entities and not-for-profit organizations that provide services as well. And so sometimes what one of us can or can't do is complemented by another organization that can do something or have funding for something that another organization does not. Our American Job Center is open to the public in Rock Island, but we also implemented an American Job Center for incarcerated offenders in one of the facilities of the Illinois Department of Corrections. And these same organizations have been very active in that as well. So the Illinois Department of Human Services will send counselors in because there's also a significant population of incarcerated offenders that have disabilities. So I'm really gratified in recent years. Craig, I think you were the first one today who used the word silos, and we are breaking those down, and we've made some great progress at eliminating them.
Susan or Damien, any thoughts before we move on?
Well,
go ahead, Damien.
Go ahead, Damien.
Okay. And I just want to add to what everyone else is saying. When I think of service integration, and once I had the luxury of leading the Joliet team, it was really understanding our role as part of a larger workforce team, right? And not just as an individual entity. So while we have the responsibilities to fulfill our roles in our respective divisions and for our respective employers, we have to understand that we are a larger workforce team, and we're stronger and more knowledgeable and more effective as a team and not as an individual entity. So when we understand that, we share more information, we become more knowledgeable ourselves, and then it's a win-win, win-win-win for all of our customers because we can guide them better. We can pick up the phone and more directly and more expeditiously connect them with the services in which they're seeking. So I think it just helps us all understand what's out there and better serve the residents within our respective counties.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on to what Damien was saying, I agree. We are part of a larger system, and none of the agencies operate in a vacuum. One of the things that we've seen that's been really gratifying as we've started working together in our area is that the staff who are providing the direct services have started to work together, and they've come up with some pretty innovative ideas to serve our customers better and make sure that all the needs are being met, which is really what we're all about. So I think starting the integration with the MOUs and whatever, but developing those relationships has really been important. and has made a big difference in our services.
So I think, to summarize what I've heard from everybody, it really comes down to, customers, right? And we define customers different ways. Some people are talking about the individual. Some people are talking about the business. And the other thing that we talk about is really it's that relationship that you have, that integration is the relationship, so you can bridge the two customers together, right? Which is really cool, which kind of leads us into our next question of how does these effective partnerships lead to adding value to your employer customers? Because as an employer myself, at the end of the day, I come to you guys to say, okay, I need help solving workforce challenges and identifying a successful pool of candidates that can help serve our customers, right? So how do you guys do that in your world? Who wants to kick it off? Let's start in Will County this time, as we started out in the Quad Cities last time.
I'll jump in, Susan.
Go ahead, Damien.
I think from the employer perspective, right? Employers have needs, and as the respective workforce entities within our county, we have to figure out how to consistently meet those needs, right? So I think as a broader team, we're able to more consistently meet those needs of the employers. For instance, if a particular employer has certain vacancies, and in our local DRS office, we don't necessarily have any customers to meet those needs, the other partners may. And I think the ability to consistently meet those needs builds relationships with those employers, builds a level of trust with those employers, and it cultivates that relationship, hopefully in a way that can be ongoing. And then that spills over into other areas where we can be value added and further cultivate those relationships. So that's kind of my perspective. And then on the DRS side, we're not only able to hopefully fill some of those vacancies, but we're also able to step in with some of the other resources that are available to us. Sometimes it's sending our business services consultants in to gather more information and further cultivate those partnerships. Sometimes it's employers needing some disability-specific guidance to retain some of their employees. So I think DRS and beyond, looking at all the partners as a whole, hopefully as those needs are identified, we're able to consistently meet those needs, kind of that supply and demand model.
Rick, how do you guys do it? How do you think that these partnerships lead to adding value to the employer customers and their relationships, your relationship with them?
I think there's a couple of things here. It shows employers that we're all working together, for one thing. 5, 6, 7 years ago, everybody had their own separate workforce or their own separate business services teams. Business services teams weren't working together. So Craig, you might have been having, somebody from my office call on you about business services. You may have had somebody from IDRS. You may have had somebody from veterans, from DHS. Everybody is calling on you, and basically we're all offering you the same products. With service integration and being able to work together and come together as a group, we're managing that much more effectively. We each know, who's working with who's kind of in the lead. And so one, it keeps us off from looking kind of stupid. We're all selling the same project or the same product, and we don't seem to know what each other is doing. But above and beyond that, and I'm going to give you a success story here. We have a very robust apprenticeship program here. And one of our manufacturers just hired an individual for the apprenticeship program who has cerebral palsy. And this is for a welding position. So while that seems like that might be kind of a stretch, you know, the employer said, my issue is not with the disability. It's with safety. How do I make this a safe environment, a safe place for him to work? So through our apprenticeship navigator, they were connected with Votech, and they're sending somebody down to the employer who is going to work with them and say, here's what you need. Here's the best setup for this type of a situation, you know, and as his disability progresses, you know, these are the things you're going to probably need. And the employer said, I have all the materials. We build things, we build equipment. That's what we do. You show us what we need and we will build it. So it all comes down to being able to work together and make a safe and effective environment for this individual to be able to work with. And I think the fact that we were all working together made it happen. And I think it impressed the heck out of the employer that we could all come together to bring this thing to fruition.
Yeah, I think that's key when the employer, right, recognizes that, because unfortunately there's a stigma out there, right, that employers need to get past. Mark, have you encountered where you've seen really that value add with partnering with Jen and Amy, and how that all works out?
I have, and I have had the privilege of a personal family experience. My older son happens to have Down syndrome, and he went through the public school system, and then with vocational rehabilitation professionals, he went through transition services. And in anticipation of graduating from high school, an employer who was educated about having employees with disabilities was willing to have my son go through the competitive employment process where he had to apply, he had to interview, and there were more people who interviewed than positions available. And he was one person who was fortunate to be selected. His wages are above minimum wage, and he's been there for several years. And when he was employed and they gave him his own key card to go in and out of the building, I was even more gratified about that than the fact that he was above minimum wage. And so that's an example where I was involved as a parent, not as a workforce professional, but I saw in a very firsthand way how this system works in helping not just the individual, but in this case, the employer, the organization. And so Craig, you're exactly right. You know, it's not so much that an owner of a business or a manager or an executive wants to discriminate. They're just fearful about how do I do this, and what do I need to learn to make this work for both of us. And so, you know, the panelists on this call are all very well versed in how to help a business or any organization with that.
Yeah, if I
Jen,
could
what are your
kind of-
thoughts? I would say, you're going to go, Amy? Good.
Yes. So, you know, when you talk about employers and adding value, you know, our partnership, I do have to tout our agency because we've added financial value to a lot of the partnerships that we have. So one example is most employers are very interested in having a strong workforce in their local area. And a lot of times that involves working with the local community colleges and getting people more training, whether it's vocational or academic training. And so our agency invests in that. And so we have what's called a community college initiative, where we waive a financial analysis, and we can send young people, or actually even people who are older who may be wanting to get some retraining. We waive the financial analysis so that we can get them the training that they need at a local community college here in Illinois. And so we pay for the tuition fees, books, transportation, anything related to the training. The other area where we invest money, which employers are very interested in, and I can't think of an employer who doesn't want support for their current workforce. And so that's where we work with our local community resource programs. We call them the CRPs, and that's, Jenny's on here, and that's ARC. In our local area, it's ARC Transitions, Robert Young Center, and Bridgeway. And so we offer the support, and we pay those agencies for reaching certain milestones. So the longer an employee is with that employer, we're providing some either on-site supports or sometimes behind the scenes to keep that employee with that employer and in good standing. And so we've invested some money in that as well. In the other area, I think we've done a pretty good job of investing in our youth. And again, employers want a young working population. And so we've invested our resources in our STEP programs, working with our transition students, helping them move from being a student in high school into the adult world. We've worked with our local CILs, our Centers for Independent Living, and helping young people get access to our services. So, one of the things that we have done during COVID is we've offered some COVID funding so that those agencies, particularly the CRPs and the CILs, can continue to provide those services. And, I think the investment that we've made helps our employers. And I think that, and we're not the only agency who makes that type of investment. We have other agencies that, do pay for training and things like that. So the partnership is great. And I think the employers, the more we talk about it with employers, they can really see how we can help with the local workforce.
Well, Amy, I think you hit a key point there in, if you're talking to a business owner, whether it be a large organization, right, or that smaller mid-sized organization, that financial analysis rather, really perks up their ears and helps them engage in the conversation much quicker. Jen, do you have any thoughts? Jenny?
Yeah, I do. I have several thoughts, I guess. The first thing that comes to my mind is that I have roughly 10 years of experience in operations and human resources management in the service sector, and that was before I switched over to nonprofit. So to me, I really understand how busy the employers are and the hiring managers are, and to revisit that that statement that, and I don't recall who made it, but that they're very busy, and for them to have good service integration and good, receive good service from the local American Job Center is super important. They really, their goal is to get their positions filled and to hire people so that they can run their operation and they can make a profit and they can serve their customers. And I think that's super important to understand from their point of view what they're dealing with. And the more contacts they have, the more people that they have to deal with, the more complicated it gets in their eyes. And so from, if you're looking at the hiring manager or the business owner as your customer, it's important to understand that having a very good system, an integrated system in your American Job Center is going to help them tremendously, and they're much more likely to come back again and again when they need assistance filling those positions, or if they need services from the American Job Center. So I think it's super important to keep that in mind, and that's when we as a CRP are looking to place our job seekers. It's important for us and for the job developer that I send out to also remember that we have two customers that we're working with. We have the job seeker and we also have the business owner. and that we cannot focus simply on one or the other. We really and truly have to do a very good job of meeting the needs of both of those customers. And I think that that's the goal of this whole service integration, is to work together and to keep in mind that that we are serving two customers. It is the job seeker, and it's also the business owner and the manager as well.
Susan, any thoughts on the partnerships and adding value to, and I love the way you frame that, Jenny. It's both sides of the equation. You can't just focus on one, you got to focus on both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that we've done in our area, you may or may not know that we're just right across the river from St. Louis. So we actually have a good partnership with our Missouri agencies too. And we've started a group kind of modeled after a group that Missouri does. It's called Nexus. And the mission of Nexus is to leverage career opportunities for individuals with barriers to employment through collaboration with business partnership. And that group is led by a member of Rick's team, Cindy. And it is all the workforce agencies in the area, including the CRPs, really anybody who's interested in being a part of it, and employers. And so it started just not too long before COVID. So of course it took a hit with COVID, but I know they're still meeting, and they invite employers to come to the meeting. Some attend regularly, some don't. But in the meeting, the agencies are able to explain what services that they offer to businesses, but then the businesses are also able to explain to the agencies what they're looking for and what kinds of struggles they might have in meeting their employment needs. And it's really been a really interesting and a good partnership for us, for all of the agencies involved, a real learning experience across the board.
So I think that brings up some great examples of inviting businesses into that conversation. And I think, between that and talking about serving both sides, the job seeker and the businesses, as we've talked, whether it be through disability services or, Mark, I think you brought up, getting integrated services into the incarcerated population. That integration is important because there's really barriers to success. As I indicated, there's stigmas out there from the business side that we need to break down. So I'd like to segue into our next conversation of how do these partnerships break down barriers with employers to help drive employment for job seekers, right? Because we understand these job seekers have barriers. They come with a little bit of luggage, a little bit of baggage, or perceived. Let's describe it as perceived baggage rather than gift, right? And how do you help employers, kind of break away from that stigma, break down those barriers, and identify these alternative pools of candidates as viable employees, right? And we already heard one great story of, where somebody broke down a barrier and engaged somebody with a disability to be a welder, right? So let's kick that conversation off. Who would like to start that one?
Hey, Craig, this is Damian. I like the way you phrased that in regards to perceived barriers, right? And I think that is the challenge, to paint a more accurate picture of the current workforce. Because the reality is we all serve and work alongside folks with varying needs, right? Some of them more overt than others. But the reality is, if we can normalize that, if we can remind folks that people with documented disabilities work alongside you every day. They don't necessarily just announce it. Hey, by the way, I have a learning disability, right? So what we have to do is paint a more accurate picture of our workforce in general, where we're not so hyper-focused and fearful of bringing on the individual with the more overt limitations, but we're creating a more inclusive workforce that is geared towards serving diverse needs, right? So moving the framework from the legal fear to a more optimized culture, where we create this workplace that addresses the varying needs of our team. So the reality is being able to adjust the lighting may be helpful for someone on the autism spectrum. It also may be very helpful for someone with migraines. Adding in, I mean, they say sitting is the new smoking. Well, the reality is the HR managers don't want people going out on disability because they have back issues. So maybe standing desks may be a good investment, not necessarily across the board, but from time to time. So how do we normalize it so that we paint a more accurate picture as to our workforce in general, instead of us being so hyper-focused on the unknown and the fear components? So moving from the fear of litigation and addressing needs in isolation to creating a workforce environment and cultures that serve the broader needs of the workforce in general.
So I guess that leads to then, you know, how does this integration help with that? How do you approach employers to break down those barriers? Mark, do you have thoughts on that?
I think that the first step is to make certain that we listen, that we listen to executives and managers and small business owners. We sometimes want to promote a program or a service or even an individual, but if we don't listen first, we don't know what that business needs. And you know, it's been articulated very well that being an employer is only part of being a business executive or manager. It's about producing a product or a service, or it's about sales, and it's about making a profit. So listening always has to come first. And then beyond that, I think inviting business people to be engaged. Our workforce development boards are over 50% business people, but the example of Kiwani Life Skills Reentry Center, the prison, we invite business people to come, and some of them are ready to hire when a person becomes a returning citizen, but many of them are not, whether they have disabilities or do not. But there's a significant proportion of that population that does have disability of one type or another. So, you know, first listening and then inviting to learn more about what we do and how we serve this population, and just trying to give them an opportunity to become aware of what the opportunities are. And in many cases, it's going to be an innovation in some organizations, but they're going to find it very rewarding. It's going to help with what they do, and it's even going to help with being a profitable organization.
No, I love that, inviting the business to the table but then listening versus kind of doing that hard sell, right? And I think part of that, and Damien touched on this, this morning I was on another meeting that was talking about DE&I, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, right? And, it was a different conversation, and it was a refreshing conversation from what we're used to, where oftentimes it's just about ethnicity, right? Or gender versus others, right? Who are the others? It just has to be something different, right? And that can come in so many formats as you listen to their needs, offering these populations as a solution to their inclusiveness, and how can they how that can augment the organization to do things differently. You use the word innovation. Does anybody else have examples? Rick, maybe you do, or Amy, you do, of how that has really helped an organization break down those barriers, and they found other innovative solutions to help their business?
Well, if I could chime in here, I actually think that right now is the time to strike with employers. Go through your town and look at the job openings that are occurring. Talk to a local employer. Employers cannot find people to apply for their jobs. There's a very low turnout when jobs are posted. And I think that the populations that we all work with right now is the time, because we are seeing an increase in people getting interviews and being hired who maybe employers may not have given a chance before. And, so I think that there's a couple things going on. One is COVID came in and laid off a lot of people. I have an example of something that, really, I think gives an example of what I'm saying, that employers have a need right now, and they're going to look to us. If we offer it to them, they're going to look to us to give them some candidates that they can look at. We had a young man who was working with the ARC, and he lost his job. He was working at a local restaurant as a dishwasher. And so he was laid off in 2002 when COVID struck. And he, with the supports that we provided, we spent a lot of time with him, both agencies, and he has successfully returned to work, but he has some supports. And so what we saw with that employer, as the business started to increase, this customer, he did have a little bit of a health issue, and instead of laying him off again or decreasing his hours, they kept his position and they actually hired someone else to come in. And then they gave this person that opportunity to stay on, even though he was having some health conditions at the time. And I think that that's the way that we turn employers, is by giving them the candidates, and if we can offer the supports that we have, employers are going to see the benefits of hiring all the folks that we work with. I mean, I think like I said, I think now's the time. Employers need us more than ever right now.
Susan, have you seen that to be true? That employers really need that challenge and that resource, and that helps break down barriers as you introduce that conversation?
Yeah, I would agree with Amy, definitely. I think the job market is right now, and employers, I think, really just need to be educated about what kind of services we can offer to help alleviate that fear of hiring someone and the stigma, like you said. I also think that the partnerships have had a real impact on this as well. I'm sure my other doors partners people say all the time, I didn't even know you existed, or you're the best kept secret, right? And so having that partnership with the other agencies also puts that information out there, and they're more likely to say, hey, DRS can help with this. Whereas I don't know that collaboration was as strong as it is now, as it was in the past. It's certainly that partnership has really made a difference, I know, for my area as far as helping customers.
Susan Fleshner, I see you shaking your head that you've really seen that augmentation. Can you expand on that at all?
Well, no, I was just going to tag up with what Susan said. I mean, absolutely. There's now a shared responsibility for not only for our job seeker customers, but particularly for the business customers, you know, that it's not just our customer or IDES's customer or DRS. I mean, it's a shared responsibility for making sure that the needs of that business are met by the services that we collectively offer. And I think our partnerships, service integration, call it whatever you want, the fact that we now work together, like Susan was saying, where perhaps that wasn't as robust in the past, serves all of our customers much better.
So to keep us on track, I think you guys brought up some examples of, and you talked broadly about working with businesses, but what I would love to hear a little bit more about is some specific examples of maybe programs that you've developed more than we talked about. Mark talks about inviting businesses in, right, to see what's going on. Has anybody developed specific programming to help, get past some of the challenges, or maybe somebody can expand on what were some unique challenges and what were the specific solutions you created to address the challenges with both employers and getting employers to engage this unique workforce?
Craig, initially, I think, and I'll go back to barriers for just a minute, that sometimes the barriers are internal. And I think one of the biggest barriers we all had to overcome, and Susan was kind of alluding to it, was that we were all competing against each other. We were all under the guise of the WIOA umbrella. We still all had our own, business services team. We were still engaging with employers. We still had our own dollars. And there came a point, and there were some trust issues there of I don't want to refer to them because in order for me to meet performance, I need to get the person that I've put money into, I need to get them hired. So why would I go and refer somebody to Susan if that's going to hinder my performance? So we kind of had to all come together and figure out what it is that we do. And at the end of the day, our charge, if you will, is to ensure that area employers have a skilled and a ready workforce available to them at all times. And we had to get to the point, and I've said this a lot, and I know people have heard it, but I believe it, that none of us are successful if we can't get an employer to sign a check. So while we have employers and while we have job seekers, and both of them truly are our customers, the real customer is that employer. I have to have an employer in order to be able to move talent forward. My product basically is that job seeker, and I use the allocations that I get to add value to that product in order to satisfy my customers' needs. And while that's kind of simplified, that's the business plan, and that is what I think businesses is kind of understand. So I think one of the biggest challenges we had was overcoming that me versus you attitude, and that, I'm not going to share because I'm afraid that if I share, it puts me behind. We didn't see the big picture. And once we realized that working together benefited all of us, and as Susan said, now we have more of a defined shared responsibility. So now working together really, really benefits all of us, and it benefits the system as a whole. And obviously that flows down to not only the employers, but to the job seekers as well. It makes it much easier to market, if you will, harder to serve populations, individuals with disability, returning citizens, high school kids. And quite frankly, right now we have businesses' attention because they are in such desperate need. And I agree. And I think it was Amy that said now is the time to strike, and absolutely right. And I think that's a lot of what's going on. And the fact that this groundwork was laid, you know, over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever, I think it's benefiting all of us right now.
Well, that was kind of a drop mic because, you know, we identified the challenge was internal. We were kind of infighting, and the perfect solution is workforce integration, right? To help serve that employer, because those employers, we need them as the draw to serve, you know, as you said, Rick, the candidate. Jenny Miller, have you found that to be successful? Have you, you know, specifically targeted employers with specific solutions to help break down some barriers and challenges?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things or the tactics that we use when placing someone, especially with more significant disabilities, of course, is to first go in and talk to the employer and find out what their needs are. And as Mark said, start by asking questions, make sure that we have a good understanding of their needs, of how their business operates, of how they hire, how they train. And part of that process builds and develops trust with the employers, because if they trust you and they trust your systems, then they're more likely to be willing to work with you and to come to you when they maybe meet that roadblock, or if they do have a problem, because, you know, in our world, every client that we work with is different. And so we do a lot of what's called customized employment. I could go into that more, but I won't. But which is often more of creating an opportunity for that person. So there's a lot of give and take. And so sometimes you try one thing and it works. And maybe it works right out of the gate, but a lot of times it doesn't. So there's really a lot of give and take, and developing that trust with the employer is so important. But it is definitely a process that you go through. And if you approach the employer by asking questions and learning what their needs are and developing that trust, then you're more likely to get further, and you're more likely to be able to break down those barriers. And, you know, once the first barriers start to come down, then after that, it just gets easier and easier.
No, I think you hit on a key challenge that is trust, right? And it's not trust like we would normally define trust, maybe, but that skepticism, because trust and understanding, because they're trusting you on something that they, as an employer, we may not ever fully understand, right? Because, you know, as somebody said, we're so busy, we're focused on so many areas. That relationship builds that trust, and we rely on you, that partner, because of that relationship. Does anybody have that structured approach? You know, Amy, I know you talked about utilizing financial analysis, right? And to kind of catch their ear and drive. Do you have any other structured processes that you use when you're addressing some of these challenges?
I mean, I don't know if it's structured necessarily. I mean, we have some programs in place, but I think one of the highlights of our program is that we work with people on an individual basis. And so that involves understanding our customer and what their disability might be, and then helping that customer get the right training, but then helping them connect to an employer. And I think the word trust, and, you know, helping them gain trust with us that we're sending them the right candidates. I mean, I don't know if I'm specifically answering your question, but the example I have of like a barrier, we have a customer that we started working with in the STEP program, and their disability, I'm kind of hoping this example will walk you through kind of how we've worked with the customer and gotten to know them, and then help them achieve a goal by really connecting them with an employer in a job that maybe necessarily didn't seem like a good fit. But it turns out to be a great fit. But we have a customer who has a disability. He has a severe neurological damage that impairs his speech. And so it's very difficult for him, especially people who are unfamiliar with him, to understand his verbal communication. And so I believe his first job was at McDonald's when he was in high school. And for some reason, he went after high school, he went and got his associate's degree from Blackhawk Community College without our supports. And so Susan had kind of mentioned that sometimes people don't know all the services that we provide, even our own customers, if we lose, if we're not there reminding them all the time. But he got his associates without our support. And then he got reconnected with us. And so we, at that time, he became interested in sound production and being a DJ and getting involved in broadcast television and theater. And so we helped him, provided some financial help for him to go and get a bachelor's degree at WIU in broadcast and journalism. And they have a fantastic program. So he graduated, almost had a 4.0 GPA, and he has secured a job. And, I don't have the details of this story about how this job was secured, but he does have a job lined up in Davenport with a production company called Done Right TV. And he feels that this is going to be a great place for him to start his sound production job. And so I think that on an individual basis, we've helped this customer kind of work through some of those barriers. And we've had to work with the employer to say, hey, we have a great candidate, give this person a shot. So one of my counselors shared that story with me actually last week. So I think it's a good one to share today.
Any other examples of what has worked to break down some of those challenges?
And I'm going to put Susan on the spot here a little bit, because we have something going on here, and as a partner, I'm very, very proud of it. And it's a direct result of service integration, of all the partners coming together, and not just in local area, in Alewiya 24, but this is more of a regional thing. And we call it accommodations to success. And Susan's very involved in it. And it involves not just job seekers with barriers, but with disabilities, but also involves employers. And like I said, Susan's more engaged in it than I am, but I think it would be a great thing to share with the group.
Yeah, I would agree, Rick. I was actually thinking the same thing. So we have an event that we do every year, except last year with COVID, which is an Accommodations for Success event. And it starts, the way we've structured it most recently is the day starts with employers are invited to come and get education about working with persons who have barriers to employment. So we have different workshops. One might be a presentation. For instance, the last one had a presentation by an employer who has hired persons with disabilities and has had success stories. And he got up and talked about what kinds of things that they did and how they've made things work and the benefits to his business. It might be somebody coming and talking about tax credits that businesses have or, have the opportunity for. I think we had 3 or 4 workshops the last time. And so the employers are there for about 3 hours in the morning. They have different education about working with people who have barriers. And then there's a lunch, we provide lunch, and there's an award ceremony for employers who've really gone above and beyond as far as integrating their workforce. So after that, the second part of the day is the part that I was actually more involved in. We have what's called a reverse job fair. And we have customers from all over the area who are interested in presenting what they have to offer to employers. And I think the last one we had about 50 customers. Some have been more, some have been less. But they work with CRPs in the areas, actually picked up a lot of that and ran with it, and helped them develop a presentation, be it via computer, poster board, whatever. They set up their own booth talking about what they have to offer to businesses, what they're interested in. And then after the presentation of awards and the luncheon, the employers go through and they meet the customers and talk to them and make connections and maybe set up interviews or however. But it really was, I left that day so excited because it was just an awesome event, and it seemed to really break down a lot of barriers between employers and persons with disabilities. And it was awesome. It was an awesome day.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of what everybody's talked about, it coming to fruition and culmination, right? And that's an example that, a true best practice that, whether we start out small or grow it, that you can start out with pieces of that and it'll culminate with it sounds like a full day of activity. But some of the things that you touched on, I really liked was inviting businesses that have success stories, right, to tell their story, because a lot of people struggle to see it themselves, right? And then you talked about additional education, and then, okay, now that we've done this, here, now do it, right? And I do mentoring and coaching on the side, and I talk to people about if you believe you can't, you never will, right? Where if you believe you can, you will. And that too many businesses don't have that in them. And I think some of the stories that we've heard today will help businesses, employers who are creating the draw, the pull for the customers on the other side that you guys are working with to pull them into employment. If helping them change that can't from can, right? And stop talking about people's disability. And this is where this conversation culminated when some of us first got together. Let's stop talking about disabilities and let's talk about abilities. Let's take off the diss. Let's stop dissing people, right? So I think we've had a very robust conversation. What I'd like to do now is see if there's any questions that anybody has from the gallery. I don't know, Jen, if you can jump on and help facilitate that.
Hi, Craig. If people want to put a question either in the chat or in the Q&A, we can field them. Craig, right now there are not any questions live. I put one in the chat to you guys that I could throw out if you would like me to read it.
That'd be wonderful. I'm trying to find it in
no,
the stream.
no worries. So as I was listening, I was curious, what state guidance or investment would you as the panelists like to see that could increase systemic support to local service integrations like the ones that you've described today?
So who wants to start that out? So Mark, can you go ahead and start? So the idea is, what guidance or investment would you like to see? What barriers do you have from a WIOA standpoint or whatnot that you see that could help you be more successful?
One facet of our state system that I think we would all benefit by having improvement of technology and have more integrated systems. The the pandemic has caused some state investment in new technology as people have had to work remotely, but we have a lot of different systems at the state level and at the local level, and it is driven a lot by states. So there is no uniform workforce system that's national, but some states have a more uniform workforce system, and it would allow all of these organizations, state and local level governmental entities, as well as state and local not-for-profit organizations to share information, but at the same time protecting personal information and protecting health information. And so that, you know, it would be great if there were more resources from the federal government to do that and from the state. But, you know, one agency that's not on the call today, that's part of our workforce system, a director of the agency told me that, you know, they have technology, they have systems within their own Department of State government that don't interface or talk with each other. So just, in my opinion, state government could improve our technology, and that in turn would help both businesses and individuals that we serve.
No, that's a great example. Technology, we've heard, I mean, heck, when you talk the pandemic, the technology challenges, whether it be interacting like we are today. We've all heard all the media about the unemployment system and the technology challenges. But Susan Fleshner, can you talk about, because I know when you started this venture, you had some technology challenges in your place, and you guys overcame them by making some specific investments.
We did. We set up a Skype referral system for partners who weren't located here. The tracking system that we use is web-based, so really any partner can log into that. But I want to go one step further, and if we're getting to make requests of folks at the state level, I would like to say to them, particularly folks at DRS at the state level, is keep sending us DRS staff at the local level who believe in what we do in the workforce centers and in the workforce system. And I am heartened by the breadth, depth of folks who are on this panel today who are involved in that, not only involved, but believe in that. I've been rather respectfully candid about our local DRS leadership in the past, that they were not involved in our center and were not interested in being involved in our center. I think they saw involvement in the workforce system as something in addition to what their real job responsibilities were, instead of part of their job. And I just brag on Damien for a minute. When Damien hit Joliet, that all changed for us. He's been a tremendous partner, involved in what we do and believes in what we do. And that makes all the difference in the world. If you have people who really believe in this, as evidenced by our colleagues on the panel today. So please keep sending us folks at the local level who believe in this work and want to participate in it and contribute to it in a meaningful way, because that makes all the difference.
No, I think that's a great point, Susan, where, in private business, we talk a lot about continuous improvement, and specifically organizations use Six Sigma, and they design with the end in mind, right? So if you get people like Damien and Jen Miller and Amy Fort that are already believe, it makes that integration so much easier, because you're not, again, fighting, the heavy current against it. Somebody else brought up, and I love it, because I've been involved a little bit in from the private business standpoint, have had the pleasure or I'm going to use the word nightmare of reading the MOU. You know, what can we do from an MOU standpoint to make it easier on you know, the people providing us as businesses and customers, you know, clients, individuals, make it easier on us all? Are there barriers there? Is it too bureaucratic? Oh, maybe I asked a taboo question. Okay, so is it
Poking the bear
realistic?
now, aren't you?
I know. Well, somebody said, you know, somebody opened the door to, hey, we need to look at the MOU to make it customer driven. So maybe let's talk about that specifically, the customer driven of, do we need to see a shift in performance indicators and metrics that drive the integration and that relationship between connecting businesses and job seekers from a more inclusive standpoint?
So Craig, this is Jennifer. I just have to say it pairs nicely with your last comment about Six Sigma and Stephen Covey, is start with the end in mind. And working backward from a customer outcome can drive some really significant changes in any system, local or state, or even federal.
So have you as individuals, whether it be Damien or whatnot, as you think about your MOU, I know that is a key. You've got to think about those performance metrics. Is there a change that you'd like to see that is doable, right? I mean, we can only really talk about what's achievable. Is there, you know, some things that we could do and migrate on within the boundaries of what we operate today?
I don't know. So let me say that, and for those who know me, that might be a shock that I don't have something to say. But I'm not sure. I think that's a broader conversation as to what needs to be included on the MOU side of things so that it meets the broader requirements, but it's more meaningful at the local level as well. So, and maybe if we didn't have to do them every year, and we could actually establish goals and objectives to be measured over a period of time, every 3 years or something of that nature, then we can gain some momentum and then measure our progress. I think the annual requirement can pose a challenge. So, you know, that would be my suggestion if we could establish vision, like just a vision statement and vision strategies for a predetermined amount of time, but not necessarily on an annual basis.
No, I like that. And I've heard that a lot from businesses, you know, as they've shifted from doing an annual business, you know, a business budget and a plan, that you spend 6 months developing the plan and then you go to start to implement it and the pandemic happens and it changes. So having that longer look with broad objectives, because, you know, some things you're going to see immediate results some things may shift over time, right? And how do you adapt and pivot to, again, the end goal is servicing the customers, right? Helping the businesses, because helping the businesses attract and gain a viable workforce, and you know, we hope that includes you know, people of different backgrounds, and creating that. I like you use the word inclusive and optimized. I loved that, Damien. Inclusive and optimized. Any other questions?
There's nothing, Craig, coming in through the chat and nothing in the Q&A right now.
Okay, I was gonna say, I thought we were gonna maybe have a Ferris Bueller's moment there, but Bueller,
Yeah.
Bueller.
Bueller. I'm going to take a minute just to say that I did put the survey for feedback on this webinar up in the chat. So if you have a minute before you move on to your next meeting, we'd love to get the feedback. And if not, you'll get a follow-up email tomorrow.
We'll just give it another minute to see.
Yeah.
I see Sherry, thank you again for your engagement. She commented about, yes, definitely technology challenges with customers, you know, and improving communication in training of staff, right? And, you know, I think we've seen that particularly in this pandemic, you know, that whether it's been in the private world, I've seen it with business people learning, having to adapt to the technology. We've seen it in the schools, you know, teachers that are used to, you know, scribbling on a whiteboard or being in the classroom having to shift. Well, I know you all have had to shift and identify how do we do our work differently and utilize technology and keep communication going. So I applaud you for that. So if there are no other questions, you know, I absolutely want to thank, first of all, our panel today for the engaging conversation. I think for me as a business, it was fun to hear of all the success stories that are happening across the state. And thank you to all of our participants. And hopefully you found this webinar engaging, and my goal is always with any of these is, you know, take away a nugget. As I said, shift that conversation from disability to abilities, shift the paradigm from if you believe you can't, you never will. So help your businesses and your customers stop that and believe that they can, because when they can, they will. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to everybody attending a future Wednesday webinar. Thank you, and once again, I'm Craig Kissinger. Thank you to our panel, and hope you have a wonderful day and absolutely have a wonderful Memorial Day holiday weekend.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great job, Craig.